welcome everyone. I hope everybody enjoyed their summer, had a chance to relax and kind of decompress, and are ready to refill their heads with information. And today we have a great special guest, Kerry Gillick-Goldberg. She's the founder and principal of KGG Enterprises, and we're going to be talking a little bit about strategic PR and crisis communication. So welcome, Kerry, and thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So before we get started, maybe you can let everybody know a little bit about what you do and what exactly strategic PR is.
No problem. So first and foremost, I own a boutique PR and marketing firm. And everything I do for a client, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, is highly customized. I don't believe in a cookie cutter approach. So nothing is, like, here's the template, here's whatever. I just don't work that way. I also feel that if you're an executive director or the CEO or the president of a board, that you know what success looks like for you and what you want me to achieve. So my goal is to kind of pull it out of the people what success looks like, whether it's media coverage, whether it's marketing materials, whether it's, sponsor engagement or event management. Whatever it is, I try to reach out and find out what will make them ultimately feel like, oh, look, she gets a gold star. I know that sounds a little,
Yeah, I didn't get enough of those in school. So yeah, I'm always looking for more too.
So I'm always looking for those extra gold stars. But so I build a plan, an individual plan for each nonprofit or client based on achieving those gold stars. And also, I do feel that one of my greatest assets is that I don't hold my Rolex, if you want to call it that, close to my chest. I am very happy to engage with people and bring different, clients together and have them meet whoever they need to meet. So I do know the fact that I do share those relationships. That ends up being something that I'm well known for. And I think that that's a major asset.
So when we talk about the kind of the two sides of the coin here, or the two parts of what we're going to be talking about, you have the strategic PR, right? And then you have your crisis management. I think strategic PR is kind of more proactive, and
yes, very.
Management is more reactive. You want to talk a little bit about those two sides of the coin? Start with maybe the strategic PR in terms of what it is and how you work that way, and then a little bit more on crisis management, and we'll get it deeper into, I think, some of the crisis management stuff.
Okay. All right. So basically, you have to be proactive with your strategic PR. You have to get as much positive about your business out to the world. And really, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, God forbid, you ever have to deal with crisis management. Your reputation has to already be out there. That is really, it's twofold. So you need to have all the good things that you put out in the world, all the information about your business, all the information about your nonprofit, all the great stuff that you do, so that if something negative happens, you have that almost to fall back on. If you go and you have some major catastrophe and you have to all of a sudden start backpedaling and deal with crisis PR, you're really at a disadvantage because you're starting at almost at less than zero. So, basically I will sit with a client and figure out, okay, what are all these assets that you have that can be shared? Whether it's your programming or, just whatever it has to do is with the positive aspects of your business have to be out there in order to survive, really, any crises that may come down the road.
So how do we prepare for crisis management? I mean, I hear some of what you're saying is that if we do a lot of positive PR all along the way, when crisis hits, it's not as bad, or we can kind of rebound from it. But what should we be doing as an organization or as a business to really get ourselves to a point where, we know what to do in case of crisis, or we're I guess we're never prepared for crisis, but at least we're in a better position for crisis.
No problem. First and foremost, we have to make sure that the entity is insured. People always forget about that, but you need to make sure that you have a liability policy. If you're a nonprofit, you need to make sure that you have your directors and officers policy, so that from a legal perspective or from a monetary perspective, that does help. And that's that's a no-brainer. First thing you have to do is make sure that your insurance is in order. Then you have to create a crisis management plan. And what that is that you're going to sit with your people, hopefully with a PR person. If not, you utilize your marketing person, and identify potential crises that could happen. You own a ride company, like one of my clients has a carnival company. Well, okay, what types of crises could happen to a business like that? And you literally sit down and you map out every bad thing that could possibly occur. And you hone in on the ones that are most likely. And yes, so there are definitely times where you have, more than one plan in place, depending on what the situation arises. Because think about it, usually these crises, they're a human issue. You've got verbal abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse. You could have a security breach, you could have an accident. There's a million scenarios, but you have to sit with your people and literally sit down and say, what's most likely? God forbid, what's most likely going to, what
So
scenario could I be faced with?
The first thing you do is identify the scenario. Then what's the second step?
Then you have to manage, you have to put a team together, because at the end of the day, what if it happens and the owner is overseas? Or what if the issue happens with the owner? So 9 times out of 10, I like to say that the owner is going to be the mouthpiece for the organization. But you need to have more than one person. So it's always great to have the owner, always good to have a PR person, or a VP, somebody else like along the business side that you can bring in to deal with media and deal with the crisis. So, because you want to have it written down. This way, there's never, nobody can say, oh, I didn't know. There has to be a policy with your employees where they're not permitted to speak to, the media. So they can't just find a random employee and start questioning them, and then misinformation gets put out into the world. Because the most important thing is to be transparent and to be as accurate as humanly possible. You do not want misinformation out there.
So part of it then is developing a formalized plan and then communicating and educating the staff as to what that plan is.
Yes, it has to actually be part of their, when you have an employee who gets onboarded, it actually really should be a part of that process as well. So it should be part of an employee handbook, just so that when you're in the middle of dealing with a crisis, you don't want it compounded. And if all of a sudden some employee that doesn't have the correct information starts talking, all of a sudden now you have 2 crises to handle. So having it written down, having a plan in place, having 2 or 3 people that are permitted to speak to the media in case the owner is not there, it's really, really important. And once you have that, you also need to have that communication plan with, okay, well, now something happened. Now I got a phone call from News 12 and they heard that such and such, happened. They're sending a reporter. Well, let's be honest. Once News 12 knows, Newsday's going to know, and every other media outlet. So the important thing is to already know who at all the news desks, or what reporters do you know at all of the channels, so that rather than having someone, make a million phone calls trying to find out the right person to talk to, this way you're actually calling them directly. I always recommend this, that it's like, okay, guys, we got a phone call from News 12. We know this is going to get out. If you're looking to deal with X situation that occurred, the correct person you have to deal with is me or the owner. Let me put you on the phone with them now. And then if, or if it's a huge tragedy and you're not really sure, you haven't had a chance internally to come up with a statement, it's perfectly fine rather than saying no comment, which people hate. People hate no comment because it makes it sound like you're hiding something. You can say, you know what, this just happened. We haven't really had a chance to make our official statement yet. So why don't we get back in touch with you in an hour? I'll make sure that you have an official statement from management. And that way, at least they know you're going to get right back to them.
So if once one media outlet reaches out to you, you should be reaching out to others?
If it's a big thing, because yes, definitely. The more proactive you are, the more empathetic you have a chance of, having the reporters be and everything else. And because you've already made their job easier, because they're going to be hunting around trying to find out who to engage with at your company or at your nonprofit. And if you're forthcoming, you call them directly, it's, oh, thank you. And you get to say, you get to be in control of the narrative. That is the most important thing, is being in control of your own narrative.
I guess my biggest fear would be what happens if they weren't going to pick up the story and now you just dropped it in their lap and,
You know what? Bottom line is, if it's something that nobody's picked up, yeah, you can wait, unless it's something that you're like, wow, there is no way that this is going to stay private. There's no way it's going to stay internal. But I'll be honest with you, the moment a media outlet gets it and it's on air, everybody follows suit. So especially because on Long Island, you have the Long Island reporter for CBS, you have the Long Island person for Channel 5, for Pix 11. Everybody lives here. And the other thing is, because the reporters all live here, they're friendly. They're used to being at an event together, hearing about breaking news together. You would be surprised at how many conversations it's like it cross-pollinates. So I have found in my experience that if one of my core reporters know, well, the other women I deal with or other men I deal with are going to find out within a half an hour.
Right. Okay. So it makes sense. So if they're going to find out anyway, you might as well, as you said, control the narrative.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. From a crisis communication plan, we were talking about a crisis communication plan. From a planning perspective and going through a planning process up front, so that what should be involved and who should be involved in that planning process in terms of putting together that, crisis communication plan, and what should be included in it?
Definitely, it has to include every media outlet that you would normally wish to engage with or not. And it really has to have every news desk's phone number, every news desk's email. If there's a reporter that normally covers your business or your nonprofit, all those reporters listed out and their contact details. You need to have everybody who is part of your crisis team. You need to have all of their contact information, because let's be honest, something happens. What I find, I have one client that who I love but drives me crazy, because I'll find out from Newsday that there was a problem. Instead of them picking up the phone, they're like, oh, we thought we could keep it internal. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way, So I think it's important for anybody who's on this call, who is an executive director or who is a CEO, that they realize that their PR person needs to be engaged, whether they're internal, whether they're a consultant. Anything goes wrong, a conversation should be had. just so you have someone to bounce ideas off of. And also so that person doesn't feel like they look foolish when a media outlet does reach out to them. Because, again, people think everything can stay internal, and people talk.
Right.
But it doesn't do any good to have a crisis team if nobody knows how to reach everybody.
So, obviously, if something goes wrong, you want to try to look the best you possibly can in that situation. Yes. You already talked about getting ahead and controlling the narrative. What other things can a business or a nonprofit do in order to lessen the blow of a crisis situation through PR or through communication or through any of those means?
Well, I think the first thing that helps is being forthright and being transparent. Hands down, I think that's the most important thing that you can do. Oh, sorry. I was going to say that a lot of it, and it's kind of hard to articulate, but it also depends on what happened. I'll be honest with you. I had an issue during COVID having to deal with someone I had not worked with before. I do get phone calls if somebody has a racial issue. I think because of all my work in wine dance for 10 years, I have a very eclectic group of people that I can rely on and that I can get, different points of view, things like that. So when it comes to racial issues, I tend to get those phone calls. And I find that if it's kind of hard. It's hard to, how about this? It's very difficult to survive something that's horrendous, right? So it really depends on what the crisis is,
Yeah, we
racial
had
issues.
I was gonna say we had a situation with a client recently where they were a preschool, special education preschool, and one of their little preschool kids ran out through an open door and was crossing a major highway.
Right, that's a disaster. Right,
Yeah.
so, total disaster. But let's be honest, the child was safe, ultimately, right? And now the company has to revamp their security rules. They've got to do whatever. Can you come back from that? Yes, you can. If you have done something horrendous that's racially motivated, if someone has, sexually assaulted somebody and they're higher up in your company, those things are going to be much more difficult to rebound. Now, obviously, if it's somebody who did something and it wasn't on your property, well, you can distance yourself from them. You can do as much as you can, but you're still going to be judged, obviously, by that person. But it really depends. It goes back to what really happened. Every situation is unique, but and then what I found was there were definitely issues that originally, when I would be asked to do the crisis PR for some of the people that had done horrendously racially motivated things, I would turn them down. I'd say, absolutely not. Like, I can't possibly, help you with that, because I kind of felt they didn't deserve to be helped. But then I had a discussion with people who work for the NAACP and minority millennials and a couple of other people. And they were like, well, wait a minute, why don't you do it and then donate the funds? And if you donate the funds to an NAACP, to a minority millennials, to, Impact, which runs Black Long Island, and certain other things, that way you kind of take this negative pace that happened that you really felt uncomfortable about, and now it benefits the actual organization. So to be honest with you, that's what I do with the funds now. When I take on a job that I'm uncomfortable with, so a lot of the crisis PR that I do, the funds go to whatever organization that I feel could benefit most from the funding, because obviously crisis PR also pays very well.
Right. So, I mean, again, how do you come back from something like that? The internet has a long life.
Yes.
And
you have to put out good. Look, the good has to balance the bad, right? So bottom line is, you had somebody who did something that was racially motivated. You fired them. they've been separated from the company. You know, you need to do a public apology. You need to maybe have a sensitivity training class and donate funds to a nonprofit that works in that arena, that focuses on that. So all those things, you need to balance it. Is the information going to disappear from the internet? No, but it'll get pushed down with all the other positives. But again, people see right through things that aren't authentic. So doing something authentic to fix the problem is the best case scenario.
That's where the corrective action plan comes in place, and making sure that there's a proper corrective action plan, and that there's,
Yes,
as you said, proper training, that there's openness and transparency, and all of those pieces that come into play.
exactly.
Yeah. So again, that's going to be really, really important. Now, you talked about the fact that you have like the owner of the company as the face of the organization when something like this happens, or in the nonprofit world, I guess it'd be the executive director or board president.
Board president.
Yeah. So are those typically who you would see as the face, and how do you, or what process do you go through in terms of training that person to be prepared for all of this stuff?
Well, media training, I think, is so important. Anybody that you're going to have out there representing your business should have professional media training. So I recommend that all the time. I have people I work with all the time that I'm constantly hiring. And what I do, and I don't think, I would say most PR people probably don't do this, but it's very important to me that someone who is representing one of my clients speaks eloquently, that I actually absorb the cost of the media training. So I put that into my contract, and I will hire, Waldo Cabrera, or one of the other people that I work with on media training, so that I know that the owner of the company can't really say, oh no, I don't want to spend the money on X. It's like, well, you already spent the money. You already spent the money. I've already paid for it. Now you've got to put in the time, because at the end of the day, you don't want someone to get a camera shoved in front of their face or a microphone and not know what to do with it. And at the end of the day, with like the owner, the reason why I normally recommend the owner is nobody's as enthusiastic as a business usually as the owner. They have a passion that comes out, even if it's the founder of a nonprofit. You want the person who's going to be the most engaging and the most transparent, and the best spoken person that you can possibly have represent your company. And the bottom line is, it's not just about having that person be prepared for a crisis. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get positive PR, right? And you want that person to speak well also for the positive PR. So all around, having that media training is really, really important.
What's included actually in media training, since I've never gone through media training?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, it's kind of exciting. Look, you want to know how to, you actually go through, I want to say I pay for about 12 hours of media training with somebody, I'll use Waldo Cabrera as an example, where he'll come in, you'll go to his studio and he'll feed you questions, and he'll teach you how to reply to a reporter. How, if someone asks you a question, sometimes, especially if it's, you're out and about and someone puts a microphone in your hand, that you want to be able to sort of repeat a little bit of the question, so that if they edit the piece, it's a full answer and not just a vague thing. We teach how to use a teleprompter. We teach how to do all sorts of different things. So, how to not bury the lead, So look, the 12 hours are a really good start. And what it really does is it takes away a lot of the anxiety, so that you don't have someone who turns down interviews just because they're concerned that they're going to maybe look foolish on video.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned that when you do set up your communication plan and you set up and decide who's going to be doing that communication, it should be more than one person. It shouldn't just be one person.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that and why and what you're hoping to accomplish.
No problem. Well, these days it's important because with, a lot of people work remotely, so maybe you don't have, this full staff with you. So who do you have? You have the owner, you have, you have the board, you choose who you feel, let's be honest, at your company who has the most charisma, right? Well, you know what, if that's your marketing person, if that's, someone over, who's a VP, whatever that is, you have to know, if I die tomorrow, who do I want talking on my behalf? And you pick 2 or 3 people, because again, what if you're on vacation? What if the tragedy is that something happened to you? I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm embarrassed to say how many, most of my clients have been with me for over 10 years. And in that time, founders of companies have passed away. So, as random as this sounds, I write a really good obit, because, and that, let's be honest, you don't want the family thinking about how to turn that into PR because they're suffering, because they've experienced this loss. So me, not as a family member, I'm the one, the PR person is the one who's out there saying, oh, well, this business owner who had a business for 50 years has passed away. And this is the, succession plan. And this is, this is what they did. And this is why it should be highlighted. And then you end up with a lot of positive PR over the fact that this person passed away. And then that's not something that you want a family member to focus on. Right. So that's when, it also helps having, a consultant or an outsider, non-family member that can handle situations like that. But I've definitely had deaths.
I was going to say, you don't normally think about taking a negative situation and trying to, well, you always try to flip it, but you don't always think that it's going to work. But yeah, here's a case where, something negative, person passes away and, you're able to kind of flip it into, this is the direction the organization's moving in, and the organization has the succession plan in place and all of the pieces are there.
Yeah. And you'd be, I guess I'm a little embarrassed. Sometimes I have to apologize to people and be like, look, I have to look at this as a PR person. It may not sound like I'm missing the person or that I'm allowing myself to have feelings. But at the end of the day, my job is to get positive PR for clients. So right. If there is a death, the goal is to make it as positive and celebrate. How about this? The goal is to celebrate the person's death and get as much PR coverage as possible. And I know that sounds awful, but it's the role of the PR person.
Yeah. We'll go back to crisis management in a minute. We've been talking a lot about it. I want to kind of go maybe more back to the strategic stuff. I think one of the questions I always have, and I think a lot of people have the same question, is, what constitutes a PRable, if that's even a word, a PRable moment? What is it that we should be pushing out there in terms of getting in front of people, as opposed to, you never know what's important enough for the press to pick up on?
Well, I always think, is this something that when you say you're going out in the world, a networking event, right? If the thing that you want to talk about is top of mind and you're like, no, you don't understand. We just did XYZ, or we're planning to do XYZ. Nobody on Long Island has done anything like this in years, where this is something you really have to pay attention to. Well, if it's something that is meaningful like that to you, then that's something that you could do a press release about. It's something that is going to be engaging and different. I usually try to, and also, if it's related to, a holiday, right? You have to think about, like, what does Newsday highlight? They're always going to highlight what's going on next weekend, right? So if you get to the next number of weeks before and you're like, look, I've got this event, they're going to help you with that. If it's, some programming that you're working on and you're a nonprofit, if you're looking, and honestly, if you're constantly filling out grants and you get one and it's a substantial one, that's a perfect thing to celebrate. Anything that you could put out there to celebrate is something that, and reporters really want to hear good news. I think,
It's funny, if you read the papers, you wouldn't think it.
but you'd be surprised. Like, I'm the one that, like, if I call a reporter, they pick up the phone. Why? Because I only call when I seriously feel it's something that they can act on. I don't waste people's time. I'm not going to put out, something little and something foolish. This is, hey, the Oyster Fest is happening. This is a major event. Well, literally, I have a media plan with each one of the media outlets surrounding that particular event, because it is, people fly in from Florida. They do, all sorts of events around that, that weekend in October. But I try to make sure that every one of my clients has something something like that, where it's like, here's good news I need you to cover. And 9 times out of 10, I'm very blessed that people pick up the phone, because I'm only getting in touch with them when it's something newsworthy.
How much is too much when it comes to PR? How much is, like, how often should I be putting stuff out there, or there is no formula? It's only when
I don't think it has to do with the number. I think it has to do with relevance. I think it has to do with if it's newsworthy, if it's really newsworthy. The reporters, there aren't enough of them. They're all operating round the clock to keep their jobs, and there's not enough reporters out there. So at the end of the day, you need to give them something that's a real story. And the other thing is, you need to be very thorough. I put every piece of information in that press release. Plus, if I think that there's people that they should speak to that can verify what I'm saying and give a different point of view, I actually add those contacts to the bottom. So this way it makes the report, whatever you can do to make a reporter's life easier, is going to come back to you tenfold.
Okay. When I think of PR, we're talking about the PR aspects of things. We're talking about reaching out to media. But sometimes when we're trying to make things happen within a company or within an organization, part of it is advocacy sort of things, trying to get maybe politicians, or to mobilize politicians or mobilize people or things. Is that part of what a PR person does also?
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit
It
about?
actually depends, because there's a fine line, because you have a lobbyist that you could hire, right? If you want them to constantly be in the face of the elected officials and things like that. A lobbyist has
not
to
constantly being in the face. Sometimes there's a specific acute need, and you need
Yes,
to
but
try
that
to
would be a
mobilize.
lobbyist who gets paid a lot of money, plus they have to register. The big thing with a lobbyist is that they have to be registered with New York State. When you're dealing with a PR person, like, honestly, with all my work that I've done in Wyandanch, I do have a very eclectic, base of people that I could reach out to, including, elected officials and different people that work for county government. And I do that as, if a client needs something, of course, I'm going to reach out to the elected official or whatever, but I am not a lobbyist. So it's definitely a difference. But I'll be honest with you, I love working with elected officials. We were just on a call last week with Senator Gillibrand, people having to do with maternal health, because she's pushing through a new act. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we do all the time.
I don't mean to switch gears on you again, because I'm really
Go for it. It's totally fine.
I'm really good at switching gears. We talked a little bit about the importance of having a crisis management plan. We talked a little bit about how organizations and businesses need to be proactive. What do I do if I don't have a plan? What do I do if, like, a crisis hits and it's like, oh my God, now what? I mean,
Okay.
how do I react in that situation if I'm a business owner?
Well, actually, this is, if you have a lawyer that you have a great relationship with, I would say that it's important to ask them who they can work with and who they've worked with in the past. Because let's be honest, if it's a big problem, you're going to have to engage with that attorney, and you're going to need a PR person that can work with attorneys. And I'll be honest with you, I'd be embarrassed to say how much work I actually get because of referrals from attorneys that I happily work with. But if you're a business owner, you have a major problem, you have to loop in your attorney and get a recommendation from them as far as what PR person to reach out to. And they'll know what PR person on the island or in New York City focuses on certain areas. And they'll know who to loop you in on, because you don't want to have that problem where now you have an issue with the attorney not wanting to listen to what the PR person says, or the PR person not wanting to listen to what the lawyer says. So if you actually just go to the attorney, get someone they work with, it just makes life much easier.
So there are PR people that specialize in different issues, industries.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I would say that, if you've done something horribly wrong on a political space, there's definitely PR people that would focus on that. If you've done something, again, that was, racially motivated, this and that, well, then having a PR person that moves in that space as well is something that's important. I also specialize in large scale events. You have an issue, you're a business owner and something's gone wrong at a large scale event, I'm your girl. That's the way. Everybody, although I work with many different kinds of businesses and nonprofits, at the end of the day, the lawyers they know what PR person specializes. There might be things where if you're in banking, let's be honest, you're going to reach out to Epic 5. That's just, it is the way it is, that everybody has good reputations based on their specialty.
If someone has an internal PR person, or internal marketing team, because sometimes they're kind of deemed to be interchangeable, I'm assuming it still makes sense for them to utilize an outsourced or an external person too.
You know what? There are differences from PR and marketing that I do think. Look, if you have a dedicated PR person who's internal, you're fine. That person, everything that we talked about, they should be aware of, and you should have a crisis plan in place because you have that internal PR person. If you just have a marketing department, then yes, do I think that it would be great to bring an outsider in to see what you have and see what you need? Yes. And let's be honest, if you are a smaller company and you maybe don't have the budget for a monthly retainer for a PR firm, but you could do a 3-month plan or a 4-month plan, I would say, put a little bit of a budget behind it, have them for a short period of time. But this way, you also know you have a relationship with them. So if they're no longer on retainer, but you have a problem, you have that relationship and you can bring them on as needed.
Is there a right size as a business or a nonprofit that I should be looking for a PR person, that I should automatically have someone on speed dial? Or no, not really?
No.
Or is there a type of?
I think you should I always think that you should know somebody. But again, if you don't know somebody, I would talk to your attorney and say, yeah, hey, who do you recommend? But no, I think especially anybody with a business, let's be honest, things can go wrong. So it's never a bad idea to have a relationship in place.
Okay. I think people, and most of the people on this who are listening in, I think they're more would prefer things go right And I
Of
think they
course.
would prefer to be in a situation where they're being proactive in terms of positive PR as opposed to crisis management situations. But unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Exactly. And it happens at the worst time. You know, it always just,
Is there any good time for bad things?
no, but it just tends to come out of the blue. And people, and sometimes people aren't prepared. But I do think, you know, having somebody that you can call in times of crisis after you've worked with them to put the crisis plan in place. See, remember that just you need to have a little bit of a budget in order to have them for a short period of time. 2 months, 3-month contract. You know, if you're large enough and you can afford to have a retainer, have them on retainer, you know, but not everybody is in that financial position.
Right. So we've talked about a lot of stuff today and we got a couple minutes left. What main 3 or 4 takeaways do you feel that, you know, people should take away from today's discussion?
Okay, so there's 3 things, and it's going to sound, might sound a little hokey, but 1, don't you ever put anything in writing that you wouldn't want a parent to read. Number 2.
Is that any parent or your parent?
No, any parents, your parents. Seriously, people write down stupid stuff. So bottom line is, don't put anything in writing that you wouldn't want your parent to read.
Okay.
Simple as that. Number 2, do not do anything that is so bad that you're going to land yourself on the cover of Newsday for something bad. That is something to live by. You do not want your photo on the cover of Newsday unless you won the lottery or you did something fabulous. Okay. And then one of my clients, Maltz Auctions, Richard Maltz runs the company. His dad always had the best quote, and I've kind of stolen it for this call. So he always said it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 1 poor decision to destroy it. And I think if you remember that, you know, a lot of things will be fine. So those are my 3 takeaways.
Cool. Very cool. So we're just about out of time. So Kerry, first of all, I want to thank you for providing all this information. I think that was amazing. I know I got a lot out of today, and hopefully everybody else did too. So I just want to say once again, thank you very much for making this.
Oh, thank you for having me. And you know, I'm always available. I'm always available if someone just wants to chat and have a discussion about something.
Do you want to just throw out your contact information so that everybody has it?
Sure. It's Kerry, Kerry at kggpr.com, or my cell phone is 516-455-3179. Text me, call me. It's PR, so I'm 24/7.
Awesome. So for everybody else, tune in on October 5th. One of my guests will be Al Borghese, who's one of the managers over at Cerini Associates. We'll be discussing automating your accounting and other processes to gain efficiencies. So thanks again. And then until then, we look forward to hearing from you. Just please stay connected, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
So long.